Welcome to Therapy, Tech, and Takeout. We're an entrepreneur and therapist exploring how technology is shaping mental health and what it means for how we live, connect, and care for ourselves. I'm Tony Teixeira. I'm the therapist.
And I'm Jackie Toll. I'm the entrepreneur. Hey, Tony, how's it going? What's new this week?
Oof. Heat.
Yeah.
Super heat wave in the Northeast. And we had a power outage.
Wow.
During this massive heat wave. Yeah, it was crazy.
No.
Friday, my husband and I were at a show, and during intermission, we got a message from JCP&L that there was an outage in our area. And we actually ended up leaving the show early. It was kind of like, it was just crazy where we were and getting back. There had been a big storm that hit and it took out tons of power lines.
Yeah.
So we had about 2 days of extreme heat and like no air conditioning. So yeah,
that's rough.
Kind of bouncing back from that. Yeah.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, that makes sleep so hard when it's hot. For me, at least, like I've always struggled with that. So, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. But I'm glad you're back and powered today, at least.
Yes, back. Power is back. It's just really interesting to what we take for granted, just to really think about what we take for granted, how mindlessly you turn on a light switch.
Yeah.
Open the refrigerator. It just really made me think of how reliant we are on so much with electricity,
For real.
And the other strange thing, too, is it was over July 4th weekend. So July 4th, it happened on the 3rd. So July 4th, like everything is closed. So it felt a little like Armageddon.
Yeah, I bet.
All the houses are dark. And they actually canceled like fireworks in my town, too. And
wow.
So it's kind of quiet and creepy and weird. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds bad.
Are you guys having a heat wave where you are? Are you struck by this weather?
It's really hot, but not as bad as that. Like thankfully we haven't had, we do have the mix of the heat and then the storms, but we haven't had anything, at least by me, take our power out, knock on wood.
That's good.
So, but I mean, that from hurricane seasons.
Yeah, plus 100-degree weather.
Yeah, that's
heat.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah. So what's happening with you? What's new for you?
Just, getting into summer. I'm looking forward to taking a road trip up to see my oldest daughter. So that should be fun. And I've just been in this sort of like, I'm finally getting into I think the heat and the 4th of July has pushed me into accepting that it's summer. And starting to embrace that a little bit more, since I usually don't like the heat.
Not your favorite season?
Not my favorite season, here in Florida at least. But I did see a summer article yesterday from New Jersey that caught my attention and made me smile. It was about a 9-year-old who, over 50 years ago, threw a bottle in the ocean, and just like last year or a few months ago, somebody finally found it when they were doing a beach cleanup.
Wow.
And and it was interesting. The woman who wrote it had already passed away. Or the woman who narrated it. It was a 9-year-old. She narrated it to her 16-year-old sister, who actually did the writing. And the 16-year-old sister is still alive. And she's like, I just love that, like, my spirit of my sister came back, and her conviction that this would be found, and like it was. And she always was so good at making these stories. It was just so heartfelt. And it was from like NewJersey.com. And I was just like, I love this story. This makes me super happy.
I love that. That is really heartwarming. I love those moments. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that kind of ties into our theme for today, which is just a hodgepodge. We've never done this before. We've got 3 articles that are kind of like summer tech news that we thought we didn't want to miss. None of them are really long enough for a full episode, but I think they're all worthwhile, and I hope that y'all enjoy.
Yeah, I love this idea. I love the idea of like the summer tech news. It was your idea, so thank you for coming up with that.
Thanks.
This will be fun to talk about these articles.
Yeah, I had some long form articles that I was like thinking about for this week, but they were kind of heavy, and I'm like, I feel like I need light. It's summer. We need some light. So there's a little heavy in here, but hopefully, mostly good summer vibes.
Yeah. So which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with the one that is it's from Inc. and it says, "Want to be more persuasive? A massive new study of 7,002 Shark Tank pitches says this surprising factor makes a big difference."
I love the title.
right? Very long title.
Yeah.
But I really thought this was an interesting article because it talked about persuasion and the things that we can do in our daily interactions to increase persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
And the big one it talked about was sort of mimicking the timbre and tone of the person we're trying to persuade.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to kind of know if that's something, you know, you've learned about or dug into based on your scholastic endeavors.
So what's interesting, what came up for me was thinking about what I've learned about something called mirror neurons,
Mhm.
which we all have and kind of in our brains that we see. Usually has to do with kind of like mimicking or looking at visual input from someone else. That someone who's mirroring us subtly, that person feels more familiar to us. And that mirror neurons have that like feeling of like kind of the match. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, that matches, that feels good, and that feels right. And us therapists know about that because it actually helps us stay connected and in sync with our clients. So, and sometimes we do it on purpose, and sometimes I just notice that I'm doing that as I'm with someone and I'm really like in the moment with them. Their head tilts, and so does mine. And you just get connected in that way. So this article was about timbre and like purposefully using that because they looked at people who got their pitches taken, selected. Thank you for that word. And they went back and they looked at the timbre of the pitcher, right, with the shark who took them on, and it was similar in like thousands. I forget, right? So that was really interesting, and that people trust voices that sound like their own.
Right.
And that probably works with mirror neurons too. We tend to trust people who mirror us just in general. So the psychology on this I thought was right on point. What was interesting though is that we can't usually change our timbre. Who you are is who you are, but using AI to change your voice to match, that feels a little creepy.
Yeah. And they're just AI agents. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that really hit home for me was when they tied it back to Plato. And they talked about how, you can have the most persuasive argument without having the argument that's actually best for people or, having a real
with the most wisdom or the best outcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Justice. Any of those core tenets of, I can't think of the term right now, but, Plato. So I thought that was really interesting because when applied to AI, if you can call, say you call my voicemail and it picks up and it's an AI agent and it's like, hey, Tony, how are you doing? And it mirrors your timbre and stuff. And you're building trust immediately and faster than you would had I answered the phone and had that conversation. That's interesting and kind of creepy to me.
Yeah, because it's about persuasion.
Yeah.
That is not, it's kind of like the whipped cream that you put on your waffle. You don't really need it there. It dresses it up, doesn't add more, flavor or content or good calories. So like the persuasion is like the thing that pulls people in, but there's no substance to it. So that's a little creepy and a little scary that, and that's like marketing though. Marketing is about like pulling people in and persuading them, but you hope that what's behind that, is you're going to get something out of it.
Right.
So in the wrong hands,
not great. Especially when you think of all of these or all of these scams that you hear about. I mean, I love the idea of at least being able to take the human trafficking out of the scams. Maybe it would be better if they were all run with AI instead of actual human beings. I mean, that would be better for the human beings at least. But the idea that it would be even more persuasive, more dangerous, all of those types of things is pretty scary when you think of how easy it is already for people to get caught up in these things. And then like the shame spiral and all this stuff, we've talked about with that type of thing. So.
And how simple are we as human beings that somebody who sounds like us is more persuasive,
right?
Or that somebody who mirrors us, we might feel more familiar. Yeah. So we're pretty simple.
Well, it makes me think
She's-
back, evolutionarily, that probably makes sense. We were all at some point in groups where everybody did somewhat look and sound similar. And then at some point, people who looked and sound different came along, and the initial reaction was fear. And, perhaps, I mean, it kind of clicks and makes sense, but it's not something we think about today. That's not how we think we're living our lives today, right?
Yeah. The evolutionary piece makes so much sense because the people who look like me or sound like me are the ones who are raising me and are feeding me and are providing safety. Someone who's not may not be, and yes, they could be harmed. We're really built for survival, so it really is about survival. But you and I can both see how those pieces can end up leading to stereotypes, discrimination, and
I was
and
just
things
thinking
like
that as you were saying it, unconscious discrimination or bias, towards similar and at the expense of things that are different. What recommendations do you have for people to notice this? Do you have anything, or be less susceptible to this type of thing? Is there? I don't know. Other than research.
Yeah.
I hate to say do
I
your
don't
own
know,
research.
like in the day to day, people who are mimicking us a little bit or leaning in, I mean, they may be connected. I guess we always have to go back to, doing a gut check. What feels good and right? Is this person who's across from me really feeling connected to me? What am I noticing about what I'm doing? Sometimes we ignore our gut. That might tell us there's something else going on. Someone who may be doing that may be trying to scam us.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody on the phone who's, kind of overly solicitous might be trying to scam us, so we want to be careful about flattery and things like that. That was one of the thoughts that came to mind, and to really just always check in with your gut when you're feeling kind of with someone. The thing that came up, I think, about people who are dating for the first time, right? And they go out on those first 2 or 3 dates and everything feels wonderful and oh, it's gonna be great. You want to hang out with that person a little bit more. Chances are someone who's doing this in the long run, they're not going to be, especially if it's kind of like a scam situation, they're probably not going to be able to sustain that for a really long time.
Yeah.
So to, be aware and to notice what's happening.
I love that. I love that. Check your gut. And then also, even if your gut feels all right, check with your crew, right? Make sure,
Right.
and listen to them if they're raising the warning signs too. Because sometimes, our guts can be off, or we're, like you said, we're just not listening to them for whatever reason. We're blinded by it and we can't hear it. But yeah, I love that. I love the idea to check in with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Okay, you ready for the next one?
I'm ready for the next one.
Yay. All right, so this is a Wired article called "Inside the Luddite Festival: Harnessing Gen Z's Rage Against Big Tech." And this is kind of in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know this was happening. This sounds like a really interesting event. But of course, I wouldn't know it's happening because they don't advertise it anywhere other than physical media locally.
Right.
So apparently there is, in New York City's East Village, a gathering that is kind of this, I want to say it's kind of like Burning Man meets, I don't know. But it sounds really cool, where it's all about getting away from tech and celebrating human connection and getting back to it. And I love the idea that Gen Z is really the fuel behind this, as the generation that grew up having tech in their pocket.
Right.
And saying, hey, even if we're not willing to take tech out of our pocket in our day-to-day lives, we still need this space where we can celebrate disconnecting from it.
Right. And I wanted to say, where Burning Man meets, the feeling came up for me, Shakespeare.
I love that.
Because they actually had this three-dimensional stage that was created out of a head with curtains. And the curtains kind of have that feel of Shakespeare.
I love that.
Just these sheets and stuff. So so they, the tech generation that grew up are saying, let's walk away from that for a little while. Let's create community around, putting our phones aside, to the point where the whole festival was created, was advertised in, posters up in storefronts and on, telephone poles and
Yeah.
zines
I know.
and things like that. So there was none of it in social media, although I suspect people who maybe saw it might have posted. But their goal was not to do that, was to really kind of create community and have people come out, put their phones down, really connect and be without technology during this festival. I love this quote: society is getting faster and faster, and we're just using scrolling to cope.
Yes.
To cope with and so the feel of this whole festival was really slowing down.
Yeah.
It was like kind of the opposite of that. Like, let's really kind of slow down. And if you slow down, then you don't have to cope with how fast society is. You can connect.
You can be right there with each other. Yeah.
Right. So the emphasis was on human connection. Right.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too that the part of the reasoning why they didn't want to put this on social media was like, when you do that, you feed the beast, kind of. Like, you give all of this information to these big tech platforms to use how they want. And so really to reclaim your privacy, your connection, all of that stuff. And also addressing the fact that, like, if you leave Facebook, you leave a community, and that's not
right.
nothing.
And
I think, it's kind of coming to terms with all of it, right? Like, most people aren't walking away from technology 100% in reaction to this. And so it is finding those places and those spaces to make that connection. I want to say I found a marketing group in my local area, and it's amazing. Every week they have 2 different meetings in different sort of neighborhoods, and it's just, between 40 and at the low end 20 different people, and they come, and it's just like, it's community. Like, everybody goes around and talks about what's going on, and really, really cool. Yeah, I hadn't really found anything like that in the past. And so, finding those places to have community, it's hard at times.
It is hard. Yeah.
And we think there aren't any anymore, but there are.
There are places out there, yeah, but we don't really, if we get really kind of trapped in social media, we're not really going to see them. So it might be bias again, right? We're looking at one thing, so we don't notice anything that doesn't look like social media. I think that this Luddite Festival, one of their goals was to also teach people how to get off these big tech platforms, like, and in what ways, and to be critical about them. And I don't mean critical like, oh, that's bad, that's terrible, I'm never going to do that, but like to have a critical understanding of what the pluses and minuses are, like what we're losing and what we might be gaining. And I think that that's really important, to have your eyes open. I'm using it for this reason. This connects me to this community for this reason, right?
And I don't have to look at everything.
I don't have to look at everything. I can go in and check, what is my art group doing, kind of this month, and what events do they have, or what are the things happening in my neighborhood that might lead us to being with people IRL, right?
Right. Absolutely.
That is a really great use for social media, I think, in figuring out how we can actually then see people in real life, in person. They mentioned like getting hobbies and stuff, like, right? And I was thinking, yeah, that is like a great tip. If you have things that you're doing in your real life, then you're going to fill your time up with those things, instead of like really just scrolling on social media and feeding the beast.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. I posted today something, I have a guest blogger who did a blog post, and as I was putting the post up, I'm like, oh, I'm feeding the beast. It's like, so every time now, I think it's going to really make me think about when I'm posting something, am I adding value?
Yeah.
Or not? And who am I adding value? Is it like just for me? Am I, this particular article was about chronic illness. So I kind of feel like, well, sharing that's really important.
Really important. Yeah.
Like, I think there are people out there who would feel less lonely, if they were able to understand and see that, ooh, yeah, that is what I go through. So there's just so many pluses and minuses.
I know. There's no straightforward answer to it. It's very nuanced. There's a penumbra out there of how it feels. The funny thing that came to mind as we were talking was, what a great idea for a third-party app, something that you could feed all of your social media things into and then say, only show me these things. So you didn't have to exercise restraint when you went into the app to say, I'm only going to look at my art group, because it's going to feed you everything. But if anybody out there wants to steal it, I'm totally okay with it.
Jackie, I love your entrepreneur mind. Like, automatically you came up with something.
I would love that app. So if somebody wants to make it, please, I'll be your guinea pig. But yeah, no, I think, and again, it's like adding another piece of technology. So it is that, plus and minus. There's benefits and downsides to all of it.
You don't have to open your door to everybody who comes to your door.
Right.
I mean, that's the real world, match to doing something like that. We don't have to open our door and serve wine and cheese to, like everybody who shows up.
Can I
Well,
tell
I got
you
a ring camera, right?
Can I tell you a really embarrassing story that's along those lines?
Please.
When I was in my late teens, early 20s, there was a really sweet family that would come around my neighborhood, and they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were recruiting, right? And so a few times, and I was really lonely, and so a few times I was like, sure, we can hang out. And then it got where they were coming all the time, and I was just I said I don't really think this is for me, da 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 da, and they were just not taking no for an answer. So I used to go, I had my son was a toddler at the time, and when I would hear the doorbell ring, I would pick him up and I would run into the back and hide in a closet. It took 5 times of them coming by till they finally stopped. But I was just I had tried the verbal, I just needed it to stop, and I couldn't be so rude as to sit there. I had to be I can't be seen, and so yeah, I would do that. So
yeah, you had to stop reinforcing them.
Exactly.
It's the reinforcement principle.
But when I tell people that, I'm it sounds like I'm insane. That I'm hiding in my own closet, clutching my toddler, being shh, they're dangerous people outside or something. When they were really sweet, but I couldn't. So you're right. You don't have to open the door to everyone.
Thank you.
I'm not going to forget that
story.
I probably needed to hear that years and years ago. But yeah, it's true, and now we have the door wide open for everybody all the time.
Yeah, our phones are having the door open for everybody. And all information is as equally important as every other piece of information. There's no way for our brain to know this is important, this is not important, this is an ad for something I don't need versus, there's a recall on something that I use every day and I should be aware about that, right? Everything is exactly the same. So, this kind of speaks to our guest who was with us last time about that alert signal. We're always on high alert. If everything has the same amount of importance and safety, attached to it, everything is important. We're constantly trying to filter.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah. And social media is deciding what's important based on what's most monetizable for them, not what's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. That's a
heavy.
lot.
I thought this was going to be a lighter.
I know. Okay. Well, let's get to lighter then. So this one is a really cool use of tech that I think is great as we get into the summer and folks are road tripping or doing other things. It's an article from The Verge, and it says, Apple's weird anti-nausea dots cured my car sickness. I am in love with this idea.
Immediately texted my daughter, who loves to read, would love to read in the car. She gets car sick all the time. I'm she has an iPhone. So I'm not an iPhone girly, so I couldn't even test this out. So I immediately texted her. And she's wow, that's really cool. So I said, if you use this, please let me know. I really want to know if it works for you. But this is really weird.
Yeah.
The dots on the page?
Yeah.
The thing that you're reading?
Move, with how you're moving. And it does work. For me, I get super car sick.
Did you try this?
I did. Because I wouldn't even try to read a book or you know what I mean? But just checking emails or reading a text message, just that little bit, I can start to get nauseous. So I turned this on and it's really helpful. It makes it where it's because I'll be okay, I can read a sentence and then I have to look up. That to try to, and this makes it where, I can actually get through the thing without feeling like we need to pull over.
So it's kind of there's a mismatch between our eyes are still and our inner ear is picking up the movement in the car. So that mismatch is really what's for lack of a better way of explaining it, is what makes us nauseous. And those dots move with how the car is moving. So it senses how the car is moving.
Probably.
So it draws our eyes, and so we notice the movement, and then we don't feel as nauseous. It's really a very simple concept. It's really, wow, just put dots on the page that are moving with the
Yeah.
car, and that works. But the thing that I thought about is, I'm like, Jackie, you're in the car and you're working. Like, now there's tech that makes it easy for you to stay plugged in
Yeah, fair.
and to not pull your plug.
Fair.
What's that like? That I noticed that.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't that I wasn't doing it before. It was just that I had to be really like stilted about doing it before. Whereas now it's like a little less like jarring. But yeah, I do think that that's a really valid point. A few weeks ago, I took my car in for a service and they gave me a car that drove itself. And
Huh?
yeah, and while that was cool, I had to go to Orlando, I had to go to some places, and it really did cut down on the fatigue of driving. Like the last day, I think I had it for 4 or 5 days. The last day I had it, I noticed I'm like reading an email. Like I'm like fully doing things like you shouldn't be doing when you're driving because it crept up real quick. You know, it went from, oh, like I'm not going to do that to like, oh, I haven't looked up for too long. And that was a real wake-up call for me where I'm like, oh, this isn't something that is a good fit for me because I have a hard time putting it down. And I like it. I love a road trip for that reason because it does, like when you're driving and you got to have your hands on the wheel and stuff, it does at least force you to stop checking your phone and looking at and being connected to those types of things, unless you're on a call, which is the nice way to be because you're talking to a person.
Right.
But yeah,
Jackie, do you remember the days before cell phones when we would like drive around? Nobody knew where we were.
I know. Isn't
Nobody
that
could
wild?
call us.
Well, the funny thing is, by the time I started driving, I had a cell phone, but it was at least a dumb cell phone. Like, you know, it was way before smartphones existed.
Right.
But it was that my parents were really, I think, afraid of not knowing where I was, how to reach me. It was like something I remember growing up with, knowing that like they were nervous about and afraid of. And so I didn't have as much of that, but I've always felt like longingly when I hear about that, those childhoods of like not knowing. But then I say to my kids, like, wouldn't that be nice? It would be nice to just disappear for a week. And they're like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But they just don't know.
I grew up with come home when the streetlights come on.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, way of living.
Yeah.
I went around the corner, hung out with friends. My mother didn't know where I was. I mean, I used to take the train into the subway into Manhattan and take dance classes when I was a teenager.
That's awesome.
Because I used to dance growing up. I'm not even sure if maybe I told my mother I was going. I don't know. It was summer, so I'd be gone for a while. So, I go back and I think about that. I'm like, my gosh, I would never have, like, my kids would never have done that. I would never not know where they were. It was a different time.
Absolutely. Well, and there's also,
suppose.
I think, a difference in community, right? Like, I think you're probably more apt to be open to something like that if you know who your neighbors are and you know your kids going or who they're hanging out with and stuff. I think living in Florida at the time when I grew up, it's less like this now, but back then it was very transient. Like people were here and then people weren't, and like there were just a lot of. It wasn't a place where people came to live unless you were like retired, and so I think it was a little less like maybe it was driven by some of that, and then some of just the fear of everything in the 80s.
That is a really good point, because as you were saying that, I imagined going around the corner and looking at houses and like, I know who lived there. I knew who lived there. I knew who lived there. I knew their parents. I knew every kid in their house. And I could like literally walk around the corner and see all those houses and know exactly, who's living in those houses. So didn't necessarily make us any safer, or didn't make me necessarily any safer. I think there's kind of a false safeness to that. But I know when I was raising my kids, and, media has a big role to play in this, because it was like, be careful, there's a white van in the neighborhood, and parent moms are texting each other, and it's on the news, and, you got to get the kids inside and make sure
what's the consequence of not doing it? You know what I mean? You're like,
right.
The consequence is so steep that it's like so scary, like that, but it probably was a little restrictive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, looking back, I don't know how you were with like your kids growing up, but I feel like I probably was a little restrictive.
Oh, yeah, I
and
definitely
giving them,
was.
like, kind of this definitely the space that I had growing up.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't
Yeah.
know, like, our street was busy, when my kids were growing up, so it was kind of like it wasn't a place to go outside, but thankfully, there was a church that was the lot behind ours, and it was just a big grass field where people parked, and so, they had p space in kind of our extended backyard to play and run around and stuff, but it really wasn't like, "Go hang out with the neighbors." My kids didn't go to the same school and stuff, so yeah, it was definitely, kind of constrained. It was everything was, like, activities. Going
Mm,
to this, going to that, all these,
right.
like, clubs and sports and this, which is really draining as a parent too. It would have been nice to be like, "Go out and come home at dinner time."
Right. And this, I think this brings us back. I can land the plane on this
Yay!
one because I think it really goes back to why sometimes we get really comfortable with the social media and the technology in our house. We know our kids are home and they're safe.
Yeah,
Or at least we think they're safe. I mean, we've done some stuff on bullying and things like that. I mean, it's not a safe space necessarily being online, but if you know your child's home, you feel this sense of
yeah,
security that you know where they are. They're in the house. They may be on their phone. They may be on their laptop, but it feels a little less scarier than they're outside and I don't know whose house they're at and I don't know who's driving by. But we have to be careful not to be lulled into a false sense of security either.
for sure, for sure.
How was that?
I love it. I love it. That's why you're the master, Tony. Well, this was fun. I enjoyed
It was
this,
fun.
bouncing around between a few topics. I hope you guys did too. If you have a second, please feel free to give us a like or a follow, and we'd love to hear your comments. I reply to them, so let us know if you've got a question or feelings on any of these topics. We look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks so much, Tony.
Thank you, Jackie.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.